Hey everyone, welcome back to English Vibes.
Hi, we're so excited you're here today.
I'm John.
And I'm Maya. We're here to help you practice speaking English naturally.
If you enjoy our videos, don't forget to hit subscribe and give us a thumbs up.
Yes, please. It really helps us. So today, we're talking about climate change.
That's right. We'll discuss what climate change is, how to talk about it, key vocabulary, and what people are doing about it.
This is such an important topic. Climate change affects everyone on the planet, so being able to discuss it in English is essential.
Exactly. So let's get started. Maya, what exactly is climate change?
Climate change refers to long-term shifts in global temperatures and weather patterns. While climate has always changed naturally, current changes are primarily caused by human activities,
What human activities are causing it?
mainly burning fossil fuels like coal, oil, and natural gas. This releases greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, which trap heat and warm the planet.
What are fossil fuels?
Fossil fuels are energy sources formed from ancient plant and animal remains, coal, oil, and natural gas. We burn them for electricity, transportation, and heating.
And what are greenhouse gases?
Greenhouse gases are gases that trap heat in Earth's atmosphere. The main ones are carbon dioxide, CO2, methane, and nitrous oxide.
Why are they called greenhouse gases?
They work like a greenhouse for plants. They let sunlight in, but trap heat, preventing it from escaping back into space. This is called the greenhouse effect.
So, some greenhouse effect is natural and necessary.
Exactly. Without any greenhouse effect, Earth would be too cold for life. The problem is we've intensified it too much, causing global warming.
What's the difference between climate change and global warming?
Global warming specifically refers to Earth's rising average temperature. Climate change is broader. It includes warming plus all the other changes, like extreme weather, sea level rise, and shifting seasons.
So, global warming is one part of climate change.
Correct. You might say global warming is causing climate change, or climate change includes more than just rising temperatures.
Now, let's talk about how to discuss the evidence. How do we know climate change is real?
There's overwhelming scientific evidence. Rising global temperatures, melting ice caps and glaciers, rising sea levels, ocean warming, and more extreme weather events.
How much has the temperature risen?
Global average temperature has risen about 1.1 degrees Celsius, 2 degrees Fahrenheit, since pre-industrial times. You might say the planet has warmed significantly, or temperatures are rising faster than ever recorded.
That doesn't sound like much. 1 degree?
It seems small, but even a 1 degree global average change has massive impacts. Small changes in average temperature lead to extreme weather, ecosystem disruption, and sea level rise.
What about the ice caps? How are they affected?
Arctic sea ice is melting rapidly. You could say the Arctic is warming twice as fast as the rest of the planet, or polar ice is disappearing at an alarming rate.
What about glaciers?
Glaciers worldwide are retreating. You might say mountain glaciers are shrinking, or many glaciers could disappear within decades.
What does retreating mean for glaciers?
Retreating means shrinking or pulling back. The glacier is retreating means it's getting smaller, melting faster than new ice forms.
Now, let's discuss sea level rise. How much have sea levels risen?
Sea levels have risen about 20 centimeters or 8 inches since 1900, and the rate is accelerating. You could say sea levels are rising, or coastal areas face increasing flood risk.
Why do sea levels rise?
Two main reasons: thermal expansion, water expands as it warms, and melting ice from glaciers and ice sheets adding water to the oceans.
What's thermal expansion?
When water gets warmer, it takes up more space. Thermal expansion means the ocean is expanding because it's warming. Even without melting ice, warming alone raises sea levels.
Now, let's talk about extreme weather. How is climate change affecting weather?
Climate change is making extreme weather more frequent and intense. Heat waves, droughts, floods, hurricanes, and wildfires are all becoming worse.
Can you give examples of how to describe these?
You could say heat waves are becoming more common and severe, droughts are lasting longer, hurricanes are intensifying, wildfire seasons are getting longer and more destructive.
What's a heat wave?
A heat wave is a prolonged period of excessively hot weather. We're experiencing a heat wave. Means temperatures are unusually and dangerously high for several days.
What about droughts?
A drought is a long period with little or no rain, causing water shortages. The region is suffering from drought, or drought is affecting crops.
How do you talk about wildfires?
Wildfires are raging across the region. Fire season is starting earlier. Climate change is fueling more intense wildfires, or millions of acres have burned.
What does raging mean?
Raging means burning intensely and uncontrollably. The fire is raging means it's spreading rapidly and destructively.
Now, let's discuss the causes in more detail. What activities produce the most greenhouse gases?
The biggest sources are burning fossil fuels for electricity and heat, transportation, cars, trucks, planes, and ships, industry and manufacturing, agriculture, especially livestock, and deforestation.
How does transportation contribute?
Cars, trucks, planes, and ships burn gasoline, diesel, or jet fuel, releasing CO2. You might say transportation accounts for a large portion of emissions, or vehicles are major carbon emitters.
What are emissions?
Emissions are gases or substances released into the air, especially pollutants. Carbon emissions or greenhouse gas emissions refer to CO2 and other gases released by human activities.
How does agriculture contribute to climate change?
Livestock, especially cattle, produce methane. Rice farming releases methane. Fertilizers release nitrous oxide. You could say agriculture is a significant source of emissions, or cattle farming produces methane.
What's deforestation and how does it relate to climate change?
Deforestation is cutting down or clearing forests. Trees absorb CO2, so removing them means more CO2 stays in the atmosphere. Deforestation is contributing to climate change, or we're losing our carbon sinks.
What's a carbon sink?
A carbon sink is something that absorbs more carbon than it releases. Forests, oceans, and soil are natural carbon sinks. They help remove CO2 from the atmosphere.
Now, let's talk about impacts on ecosystems. How is climate change affecting nature?
Species are going extinct, coral reefs are bleaching, ecosystems are shifting, and biodiversity is declining. You might say, climate change is devastating ecosystems, or wildlife is struggling to adapt.
What does coral bleaching mean?
Coral bleaching happens when warm ocean temperatures stress corals, causing them to lose their color and die. Coral reefs are bleaching, or the Great Barrier Reef is dying.
How are animals affected?
Many species can't adapt quickly enough. Polar bears are losing their habitat, migration patterns are changing, or some species face extinction.
What does extinction mean?
Extinction is when a species dies out completely and no longer exists anywhere on Earth. Species are going extinct, or we're facing a mass extinction event.
Now, let's discuss impacts on humans. How does climate change affect people?
Climate change causes food and water shortages, health problems, climate refugees, economic damage, and conflicts over resources.
What are climate refugees?
Climate refugees are people forced to leave their homes due to climate change impacts. Sea level rise, droughts, extreme weather. Rising seas are creating climate refugees, or millions could become climate migrants.
How does climate change affect food production?
Droughts are reducing crop yields. Changing weather patterns disrupt farming. Some regions are becoming too hot for traditional crops, or food security is threatened.
What's food security?
Food security means having reliable access to enough, affordable, nutritious food. Climate change threatens food security means it endangers our food supply.
What health impacts does climate change cause?
Heat waves cause heat-related illnesses. Air pollution is worsening. Diseases are spreading to new areas. Extreme weather causes injuries and deaths.
Now, let's talk about what's being done. What are some solutions to climate change?
Solutions include switching to renewable energy, improving energy efficiency, protecting forests, sustainable transportation, changing agricultural practices, and carbon capture technology.
What's renewable energy?
Renewable energy comes from sources that don't run out: solar, wind, hydroelectric, geothermal. Unlike fossil fuels, they don't produce greenhouse gases when generating electricity.
How do you talk about renewable energy?
We need to transition to renewable energy. Solar and wind power are growing rapidly. Renewable energy is becoming cheaper, or countries are investing in clean energy.
What about energy efficiency?
Energy efficiency means using less energy to do the same task. Improving energy efficiency reduces emissions, or LED bulbs are more energy efficient, or better insulation saves energy.
What's sustainable transportation?
Sustainable transportation has low environmental impact: electric vehicles, public transit, bicycles, walking. We need sustainable transportation options, or electric vehicles are part of the solution.
What's carbon capture?
Carbon capture is technology that removes CO2 from the air or industrial emissions and stores it. Carbon capture could help reduce atmospheric CO2, or we're developing carbon capture technology.
Now, let's discuss what individuals can do. How can people help fight climate change?
Individuals can reduce their carbon footprint through various actions. Your carbon footprint is the total greenhouse gases your lifestyle produces.
What specific actions can people take?
Reduce energy consumption at home, drive less or use public transportation, eat less meat, reduce, reuse, recycle, support clean energy, plant trees, or vote for climate action.
How does eating less meat help?
Meat production, especially beef, produces huge amounts of greenhouse gases. Reducing meat consumption lowers your carbon footprint, or a plant-based diet is better for the climate.
What about flying less?
Air travel has a large carbon footprint. Flying less reduces emissions. Consider train travel instead of flying, or air travel is a significant source of personal emissions.
Now, let's discuss climate agreements and policy. What are some major climate agreements?
The Paris Agreement is the main international climate treaty. Countries pledge to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius, ideally 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels.
Are countries meeting their commitments?
Most are falling short. You might say, countries aren't doing enough. We're not on track to meet Paris Agreement goals, or emissions need to decrease much faster.
What's net zero?
Net zero means balancing emissions produced with emissions removed from the atmosphere. Countries are pledging to reach net zero by 2050, or achieving net zero emissions is crucial.
What does carbon neutral mean?
Carbon neutral means producing no net carbon dioxide emissions, either by not producing them or offsetting them. The company aims to be carbon neutral, or we need carbon neutral economies.
Now, let's discuss climate skepticism. How do you respond to people who deny climate change?
Focus on evidence. 97% of climate scientists agree climate change is real and human-caused. We can see the effects already. The scientific evidence is overwhelming.
What if someone says, the climate has always changed?
You could respond, that's true, but current changes are happening much faster and are caused by human activities, not natural cycles.
What if they say, it's cold today, so global warming isn't real?
Weather and climate are different. Weather is short-term atmospheric conditions, today's temperature, rain, wind. Climate is long-term patterns over decades. Weather is what you see outside today. Climate is what you expect over years.
Now, let's discuss climate anxiety. What is that?
Climate anxiety is worry or distress about climate change and its impacts. You might say, I feel anxious about climate change, or the climate crisis is overwhelming.
How do people cope with climate anxiety?
Taking action helps reduce anxiety. Focus on what you can control. Connect with others working on solutions. Balance staying informed with self-care.
Now, let's discuss different perspectives. Some people prioritize economic growth over environmental protection. How do you talk about this tension?
You might say there's tension between economic development and environmental protection, or we need sustainable development that doesn't harm the planet.
What's sustainable development?
Sustainable development meets current needs without compromising future generations' ability to meet their needs. It balances economic, social, and environmental concerns.
What about developing countries' perspectives?
Developing countries argue rich countries caused most emissions historically. We need to develop our economies. Climate justice means rich countries should do more and help poorer nations.
What's climate justice?
Climate justice recognizes that climate change disproportionately affects poorer nations and marginalized communities who contributed the least to the problem. Climate justice demands fair solutions.
Now, let's practice some debate phrases. How do you express concern about climate change?
I'm deeply concerned about climate change. We need to act urgently. This is a crisis that requires immediate action. Future generations will suffer if we don't act.
How do you express skepticism or questions?
What evidence supports this? How do we know this is human-caused? What about the economic costs? Or are the solutions realistic?
How do you express hope or optimism?
Technology is improving rapidly. Renewable energy is becoming cheaper. People are becoming more aware. We can still make a difference if we act now.
How do you express urgency?
We're running out of time. The window for action is closing. Every year of delay makes it worse. We need to act now, not later.
Now let's discuss tipping points. What are climate tipping points?
Tipping points are thresholds beyond which changes become irreversible and self-reinforcing. We're approaching dangerous tipping points, or some changes may become irreversible.
Can you give examples?
If Arctic ice melts completely, it won't reflect sunlight, causing more warming. Permafrost melting releases methane, accelerating warming. Amazon rainforest collapse could release massive amounts of carbon.
That sounds scary. Is it too late to do anything?
It's not too late to avoid the worst impacts, but we must act quickly. Every bit of warming we prevent matters. Or the future isn't predetermined. Our actions make a difference.
Now let's talk about greenwashing. What is that?
Greenwashing is when companies falsely claim their products or practices are environmentally friendly. That's just greenwashing, or companies engage in greenwashing to appear sustainable without making real changes.
How can you identify greenwashing?
Look for specific, verifiable claims, not vague promises. Check for third-party certifications. Watch for companies that talk about sustainability but don't change practices.
Now let's practice a conversation about climate change. I'll say, do you really think climate change is that serious?
Yes, I do. The scientific evidence is clear. We're seeing the effects already with more extreme weather, rising seas, and ecosystem collapse. If we don't act soon, the impacts will be catastrophic for billions of people.
But won't solving it hurt the economy?
Actually, the cost of inaction is far higher than the cost of action. Climate disasters are already costing billions. Plus, the clean energy transition is creating jobs and economic opportunities. We can build a stronger economy while protecting the planet.
What can one person really do, though?
Individual actions do matter. They add up and create cultural change. But more importantly, individuals can demand systemic change, vote for climate action, support sustainable businesses, and advocate for policy changes. It's about personal action and pushing for bigger solutions.
Excellent. Those are great responses. Okay, let's do our vocabulary review.
Yes, let's explain all the important climate change terms.
First word, climate change. Climate change refers to long-term shifts in global temperatures and weather patterns, primarily caused by human activities.
Climate change is the defining issue of our time, or we must address climate change urgently.
Climate change includes warming, extreme weather, sea level rise, and ecosystem changes.
Next word, greenhouse gases. Greenhouse gases are gases that trap heat in Earth's atmosphere, causing warming.
Carbon dioxide is the main greenhouse gas, or we need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
The main greenhouse gases are CO2, methane, and nitrous oxide.
Next, fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are energy sources formed from ancient organisms, coal, oil, and natural gas.
Burning fossil fuels releases CO2, or we must transition away from fossil fuels.
Fossil fuels are finite resources that cause pollution and climate change.
Next word, renewable energy. Renewable energy comes from sources that naturally replenish: solar, wind, water, geothermal.
Renewable energy is the future, or solar power is a form of renewable energy.
Unlike fossil fuels, renewable energy doesn't run out and doesn't produce emissions.
Next, emissions. Emissions are gases or substances released into the air, especially pollutants like CO2.
We need to cut emissions in half by 2030, or transportation produces significant emissions.
Carbon emissions and greenhouse gas emissions are commonly used terms.
Next word, carbon footprint. A carbon footprint is the total amount of greenhouse gases produced by a person, organization, or activity.
I'm trying to reduce my carbon footprint, or flying has a large carbon footprint.
Everything we do has some carbon footprint. The goal is to minimize it.
Next, sustainable. Sustainable means capable of being maintained long-term without depleting resources or harming the environment.
We need sustainable practices, or sustainable agriculture protects the soil.
Sustainability balances current needs with preserving resources for the future.
Next word, deforestation. Deforestation is the clearing or removal of forests, usually for agriculture or development.
Deforestation contributes to climate change, or the Amazon is experiencing rapid deforestation.
Forests absorb CO2, so losing them accelerates warming.
Next, ecosystem. An ecosystem is a community of living organisms interacting with their environment.
Climate change is disrupting ecosystems, or coral reef ecosystems are threatened.
Ecosystems include forests, oceans, deserts, wetlands, and more.
Last word, tipping point. A tipping point is a threshold beyond which changes become irreversible and self-reinforcing.
We're approaching dangerous tipping points, or some changes may become irreversible.
Once you cross a tipping point, you can't go back easily.
So we learned climate change, greenhouse gases, fossil fuels, renewable energy, emissions, carbon footprint, sustainable, deforestation, ecosystem, and tipping point.
These are 10 essential words for talking about climate change.
With this vocabulary, you can discuss one of the most important issues facing humanity.
Climate change affects everyone, so understanding and talking about it is crucial.
Now it's your turn. We have a question for you.
Write in the comments, what's one thing you're doing to help fight climate change?
Are you reducing meat consumption, using public transport, saving energy, planting trees?
Tell us in the comments. We love hearing from you.
And let us know, are you optimistic or pessimistic about solving climate change?
Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already.
And turn on notifications so you never miss a video.
Keep practicing your English every day. You're doing amazing.
And remember, small actions add up. Every positive change matters.
See you in the next video.
Goodbye, everyone. Let's protect our planet together.
Quick vocabulary review. 1. Climate change. Long-term shifts in temperatures and weather patterns. 2. Greenhouse gases. Gases that trap heat in the atmosphere. 3. Fossil fuels. Coal, oil, natural gas from ancient organisms. 4. Renewable energy. Energy from sources that replenish naturally. 5. Emissions. Gases released into the air, especially CO2. 6. Carbon footprint. total greenhouse gases produced by person or activity. 7. Sustainable, maintainable long-term without harming the environment. 8. Deforestation, clearing or removal of forests. 9. Ecosystem, community of organisms and their environment. 10. Tipping point, threshold beyond which changes become irreversible. Act now. Every action counts. Protect our planet.